Hey, this is Josh, and welcome to my series on tips for online learners. Today, we're going to be talking about file management and good practices for managing your files. So, first off, why is it important to manage your files properly? The biggest thing is that it keeps you organized, and it also helps keep your teachers organized as well. And having good file management skills in school will also help with your day-to-day life as you go into adulthood and have to do adult things. Having good file management has really kept me organized, and it allows me to go back to things that I need to view without having to open a bunch of different files and try to find what I'm looking for. So as an online resource teacher, I see this all the time. These are some very classic examples of file names that I've seen before and I see all the time, and it's really not good practice. Image 17.1, scan document, pretty much anything that is just kind of like the default when you save something without properly naming it. And it is a big deal. It's going to really make it tough for you to go back to your work. And it's just nice for me knowing what exactly you're submitting, who's submitting it as well. For example, this one at the bottom here looks okay, but there's no name on it. And with that one next to it, that just tells me that, that was probably the original file and you just saved over it. And there's just so many little things you can do to make this way better. And it's really easy and doesn't take a lot of time. So the most important thing when you're naming a file is including your own name, the course name as well as the course number. So if it's Science 6, including that is a good idea, or some sort of abbreviation, especially if it's a course that has a pretty long name, like Foundations of Math 10. You also want to include the name of the assignment as well as the assignment lesson number. I'll show you an example in a second. And you may want to consider including the date. That's not something I particularly look for, but there's really easy ways you can include that. And I know some teachers would prefer that. So here's a good example right here. John Smith 3.4 physics assignment 0718. So I'm guessing that's for July 18th. And even if that is a little bit complicated, or let's say you have a really long name and you don't want to write it out all the time, I'm sure some teachers would be okay if you just abbreviated it like so. So J. Smith 3.2 physics assignment without the date. Again, the date's a really easy one you can include, but I'm sure every teacher has different expectations with this. But regardless, this is way better than scan underscore document, blah, blah, blah. And it's really easy to set this up. Now for proper file management in the real world, I guess, or in your adult's life, odds are you're going to have to make a resume someday. And if your resume is called scan document, blah, 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 an employer is going to see that and think you're probably not very professional. They're going to think that you don't know how to properly submit something like a resume. And again, this is really easy to do. And this could be one of the factors that stops you from getting that job. So a good example for just having a professional name on a document, even having your name as well as, the year, if it's like a tax receipt or something like that. I know for me, I'd always name my resume Josh Elke resume 2022. That kind of lets me know when was the last time I updated it. But even when you look in your documents, you can see when the last time you updated it was. For something like this too, you can include the name of where you're living if it's something like a tenancy agreement. It's really easy and little things you can do to keep yourself organized. And just a few additional tips I want to include as well. Be sure to capitalize the first letter in every single word in the file. Keeping everything lowercase, to me, it looks a little bit unprofessional and I wouldn't recommend it. When you start a new file, like a Word document or something like that, save as immediately. Okay, pretty much what that means is you name the file right away and then it's done. You don't have to worry about it later. And that's really useful in case something crashes. Speaking of, consider autosave functions as well, because if for whatever reason your device just stops working, having autosave on will allow you to easily just save things on the fly. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is making use of folders. So folders, again, another way to keep you organized. And it will easily allow you to go back to a certain assignment from a particular course, let's say, especially if you're not getting it done all in one day, you're going to want to be able to easily go back to things. So in this example here, I have 3 grade 7 courses right there: Humanities 7, Math 7, Science 7. And inside the math unit here, I have 3 different units separated already. And again, even the file names are capitalized as well. The first letter is capitalized. Usually on Mac and PC, it will automatically alphabetize everything. So if you have it as Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, it'll put it in order right away. But sometimes it might order it in terms of when was the last time you used that file or document or whatever. So another thing you may want to consider is using drives. So a couple examples being Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive. Drives allow you to easily share work with teachers or maybe a classmate if you're doing a group project. It also makes for a really good backup in case something happens to your device. Okay, so let's say you're working on something, you have a file saved in your computer, and then something happens to your computer and it stops working. If you have it saved on a drive, you can access it from a new device or a different device using your Office 365 account or Google account. Drives will also allow you to access files from multiple devices too. So if you're working on something from your laptop, but you want to work on it on an iPad later on, you can do that if it's saved onto a drive. You just have to log in on both devices. Just as a side note, you may want to consider saving everything onto a USB drive as well. That way you can take your files on the go. Now I know things like OneDrive and Google Drive allow you to go and do things on the go, but it's another additional thing you can have to back up your files. You also want to learn how to convert files into PDFs. There's a ton of benefits of using PDF files as well, mainly that they're easy to share. It can provide additional security and publishing options, and usually PDF files don't require any kind of paid service to view, which is important. If you're submitting everything as a Word document, the person that is viewing it likely needs to have Word downloaded on their computer in order to view the file. And you'll definitely want to learn how to convert image files into PDFs, especially if you're uploading a bunch of pictures or something like that. It's a lot easier than you might think, and there's tons of tutorials out there and tons of apps that you can use to help do this from a mobile device or even on your laptop, desktop, whatever. I'm not going to go over that in this video, but it's definitely something I suggest checking out. The last thing I want to talk about today is references in projects and assignments. So not really too related to file management, but I wasn't planning on making a whole video about this, so I thought I would include it here. So any assignment or project that involves research or using images from the internet, you have to reference it in your work. Otherwise, it's considered plagiarism. You're going to want to talk to your teacher what the expectation is for a references section. For example, if I'm teaching grade 4, my references section is pretty minimal. Okay, I just want maybe the hyperlink and the name of the website. But if you're in a high school course, for example, you might even have to use some kind of criteria like APA, and you have to follow that very closely. So the best thing you can do is talk to your teacher and know what their expectation is. You also want to know the copyright restrictions on anything you use as well. It's a little bit easier to find that information than you might think. A lot of these websites will use things like Creative Commons, and some are a bit easier to share, some are not. But you might even want to look at functions like stock images inside of things like Microsoft PowerPoint, for example. And you never, ever want to plagiarize, ever. That is a good way to get yourself a 0 on an assignment. And if you need any tips on putting things into your own words, I recommend talking to your teacher. I'm sure they'll be willing to help you out with that. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you want more tips on online learning and best practices for online learning, please check out one of my other videos in this series. You might also want to consider subscribing for more tips like this. And thank you for watching.